You've seen ruins before, but Belchite is different. Here, silence has a weight. Each crumbling wall, each hollowed window, whispers stories that no history book can contain. Imagine walking through a town frozen in time, a place where life was abruptly stolen, yet memories linger like shadows. This is not just a relic of war. This is a town that refuses to be forgotten, a town that holds the promise of a past that still echoes in the present. Welcome to Belchite, the town that Franco promised to rebuild, and yet the town that became a living monument of memory and silence. The first thing you notice when you approach Belchite is the juxtaposition. On one side, the ruins, skeletons of houses, collapsed churches, streets littered with the remnants of lives interrupted. On the other, the new town, quiet and orderly, modern and practical, built carefully away from the devastation, as if to forget, to move on. But when you step into the old Belchite, the distance between the past and the present collapses. Dust rises from broken stone underfoot, carrying with it the echoes of screams, laughter, prayers, and despair. The air smells of earth, of decay, of history suspended, unwilling to be erased. As you wander these streets, the human stories begin to surface. A corner where a child once played, now empty. A church where families once gathered, its steeple crumbling yet proud. The walls of homes still scarred with bullet holes, stubborn testimonies of violence that occurred here nearly a century ago. You can almost feel the hands of the past brushing against yours, urging you to listen. Locals, when they speak of Belchite, do so with a quiet reverence. They tell stories that blend myth and memory, stories of people who vanished one morning and were never seen again, of neighbors turned enemies overnight, and of courage born from despair. The town itself seems alive, but in a strange, ghostly way. The sun casts long shadows across streets devoid of motion. The wind whispers through broken archways, carrying the faint echoes of conversation, as if the town remembers what its people cannot forget. And as you walk deeper into the ruins, it becomes clear that Belchite is not merely a site of destruction. It is a mirror reflecting not just the horrors of war, but the human tendency to bury pain, to promise recovery, and yet to leave scars unhealed. There are moments when the silence is almost unbearable. In these moments you realize that every stone here has a story. The remains of a home suggest a life interrupted, a chair overturned, a doorway blocked, a fragment of pottery still clinging to the floor. The church, though roofless, maintains a solemn dignity. Its altar, cracked but still standing, seems to challenge visitors to remember, to honor, to ask questions about justice, memory, and time. And the questions are difficult. Why was this town left in ruins? Why did Franco rebuild a new town rather than restore the old one? Who decides which memories are preserved and which are allowed to fade? Walking through Belchite also reveals unexpected beauty. The ruins, framed by the golden light of sunset, the wildflowers growing through cracks in stone, the distant mountains rising like guardians over the town. These images are haunting. They force a confrontation with the contrast between human destruction and natural resilience. Here, history does not lie silently in books. It breathes, it moves, it challenges anyone willing to witness. Belchite becomes not only a study of loss, but also a testament to endurance, of nature, of memory, of the human spirit unwilling to forget. The people of the surrounding region, whose families once lived here, carry their own stories. Their voices, tinged with nostalgia and sorrow, describe a town that was vibrant, alive, ordinary in its rhythms, until war tore through it like fire through dry grass. Elders speak of Franco's promises of rebuilding, of recovery, but their words carry ambivalence. For them, the new Belchite never replaced the old. It sits nearby, functional, orderly, but sterile. Life continues, yet the ghosts of the past walk alongside it, unseen but profoundly felt. And as night begins to fall over the ruins, a different dimension of Belchite emerges. Shadows stretch long over fractured walls. The wind carries unfamiliar noises, untraceable but tangible. There is a sense that history here is not static. It lives, it lingers, and it watches. For anyone willing to step into this space, Belchite is both a warning and a promise. A warning of the cost of conflict, of silence, of broken words. And a promise that memory, no matter how inconvenient, finds a way to survive. In these first steps through Belchite, you are not simply a visitor, you are a witness to the resilience of memory, the fragility of life, and the haunting power of silence. And it is here, among these ruins, that the story of Franco's promise begins. Not in speeches or decrees, but in the stones, the streets, and the stories that demand to be heard. The story of Belchite cannot be told without first understanding the storm that descended upon it. In 1936, Spain erupted into civil war, a violent clash of ideologies that tore families, communities, and entire towns apart. Belchite, a quiet town nestled in Aragon, became a front line of this brutal conflict. Its streets, once echoing with the rhythm of daily life, the laughter of children, the chatter of neighbors, the hum of markets, were transformed almost overnight into battlegrounds. The war did not discriminate. Houses were leveled, churches reduced to skeletons, and the ground itself seemed to recoil from the weight of human suffering. Walking through the ruins today, it is almost impossible to imagine the intensity of the fighting that occurred here. Yet the walls, scarred and pitted, tell their own story. Each bullet hole is a silent witness to a life ended abruptly, a family torn apart. The remnants of homes, partially collapsed, suggest moments frozen in time. A meal interrupted, a chair knocked over, a child's toy lying forgotten on the floor. There is no need for words. The ruins speak for themselves. They tell of a town that bore the brunt of political ambition and ideological conflict, and paid a price that still echoes decades later. Historians remind us that Belchite was not a random target. Its strategic position made it critical for controlling the surrounding region, and the battles fought here were brutal. Soldiers advanced street by street, house by house, often unaware of who might be behind each doorway. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, forced to flee, hide, or confront violence in ways unimaginable to those living in peace. Eyewitness accounts describe chaos, fear, and unimaginable loss. In some homes, families vanished without a trace, leaving only a scorched hearth and a faint scent of what once was. Yet even in the midst of destruction, life found a way to cling to the edges of the town. Small acts of resilience, whispered stories of survival, moments of courage and solidarity emerged amid the chaos. Locals speak of neighbors risking their lives to hide children, of small gardens secretly tended to feed the hungry, of moments when humanity shone even in the darkest hours. The ruins remind us that war is never just about armies or ideologies. It is about human lives interrupted, dreams shattered, and a community forced to rebuild in the aftermath. The scars of war are not only physical. Generations of families carry memories too heavy to speak aloud. Parents who survived often did not recount the horrors to their children, choosing silence over trauma, protecting the next generation by swallowing their own grief. Yet silence has a cost. It becomes a shadow over the town, shaping identity and memory. In Belchite, that silence is almost tangible, hanging in the air like dust over the ruins, challenging visitors to ask questions, to imagine, and to remember what was lost. As we trace the streets, the war's imprint is everywhere. The old church, once a sanctuary, now stands roofless and broken, yet still upright, as if defying the violence it witnessed. In the town square, fragments of fountains and statues bear the marks of shelling and gunfire. Even the natural landscape bears witness. Scorched trees, fractured soil, and the occasional remnants of barricades speak to the intensity of combat that consumed the town. It is a place where the line between history and memory blurs, where every step is a confrontation with the past. But history alone does not explain Belchite's story. To understand its full impact, we must consider the human perspective, the stories of those who lived through it, who survived and carried the memories forward. Their narratives reveal not only pain and loss, but also resilience, adaptation, and the slow, difficult process of rebuilding life after trauma. Their voices, often soft and reflective, remind us that history is not merely a sequence of dates and battles, but a tapestry of lived experiences, each thread representing hope, fear, courage, and sorrow. As the sun dips low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the ruins, it becomes clear that Belchite is more than a relic. It is a living testament to the consequences of war, to the fragility of life, and to the endurance of memory. In its silence, it challenges us to remember, to reflect, and to confront the past honestly. It is here, amid the ruins and the shadows, that we begin to see the full weight of Franco's promise, the promise to rebuild, to restore, and yet, perhaps, to forget. And as we move forward through Belchite, the question lingers: what does it truly mean to remember? And can a town ever heal from the scars of such a violent past? After the smoke cleared and the echoes of gunfire faded, Franco's government faced a question that would define Belchite for decades to come. What should be done with a town so thoroughly destroyed, a town that had become a monument to war? The decision was made, and it came in the form of a promise to rebuild, to restore life, and to create a new Belchite. But promises, as history often shows, are never simple. They are woven with intention, compromise, and sometimes contradiction. In Belchite, Franco's promise would leave a town divided between memory and modernity, between ruins that remembered and streets that tried to forget. Walking from the ruins to the new town, the contrast is immediate. Where the old town is jagged and fractured, the new Belchite is orderly, structured, almost sterile in its precision. Streets are straight, houses uniform, and public spaces carefully planned. There is a sense of control here, as if every stone has been placed to erase the chaos that once reigned. Yet, in trying to rebuild, the new town cannot replicate what was lost: the lives, the stories, the intangible spirit of the community. Franco's architects may have restored function, but memory cannot be rebuilt in concrete and mortar. Photographs and documents from the era reveal the ambition behind this reconstruction. Blueprints, official decrees, and images of workers laying foundations speak to a vision of progress, efficiency, and renewal. The new Belchite was meant to be a symbol of stability, a tangible sign that the state could heal the wounds of war. Yet, even in these carefully composed records, there are hints of tension, an acknowledgement that the past cannot be entirely erased, that the shadows of the old town linger, watching over the streets of the new. Residents of the region often recount stories of moving to the new town, of leaving behind familiar ruins that had become part of their identity. There is an ambivalence in these recollections, gratitude for safety and order, yet a lingering attachment to the place where life had once existed in its raw, imperfect form. Children who grew up in the new town sometimes wandered back to the ruins, drawn by curiosity, imagination, or a sense of connection that could not be explained. The old town became a playground, a classroom, a reminder that history is always alive, even when power tries to impose forgetfulness. The ruins and the new town exist in a delicate balance, a coexistence that shapes daily life. The promise of reconstruction did not erase the past. It merely created a parallel reality. On weekdays, the streets of the new town hum with routine. Markets, schools, and cafes create a rhythm that feels safe and modern. Yet, just beyond the boundary, the old town waits. It waits for those willing to see, willing to listen, willing to confront the lingering presence of loss. It is a place where time seems to stand still, where every crumbling wall carries a story, and where Franco's promise, for all its ambition, feels both fulfilled and incomplete. Walking through the new town, you notice how the memory of the old Belchite shapes decisions even decades later. Monuments, plaques, and memorials punctuate the modern streets, acknowledging the destruction and honoring the lives lost. Local educators bring students to the ruins to teach them history firsthand, bridging the gap between lessons in textbooks and the visceral reality of what occurred. Art, photography, and literature inspired by Belchite flourish here, capturing not just the physical reconstruction, but the emotional and cultural dialogue between past and present. Yet, there is a quiet tension. The ruins cannot be contained, and the new town cannot entirely escape their shadow. Festivals, public ceremonies, and even casual walks along the old streets reveal the coexistence of memory and daily life. Locals speak of the presence of the past, a constant reminder that destruction was not an end point, and that rebuilding is always complicated by what remains unspoken. Franco's promise, then, is not simply about bricks and mortar. It is about negotiation with memory, about managing absence as much as presence, and about recognizing that some scars do not fade. As sunset falls across the horizon, illuminating both the new streets and the skeletal remains of the old town, it becomes clear that Belchite is defined by duality. There is the tangible reality of Franco's reconstruction, the careful planning, and the continuity of modern life. And there is the haunting, untamed memory embedded in the ruins, demanding attention and respect. The promise was made, and in some ways, it was kept. Belchite survived, but it did so not as a singular unified town. It survived as a town split between the present and the past, between order and memory, between forgetting and remembering. And it is precisely this tension, this coexistence, that makes Belchite so compelling, so haunting, and so profoundly human. Even decades later, the ruins of Belchite are not just a relic of history, they are a part of daily life. For those living near the old town, the ruins are impossible to ignore. Children play in the shadows of crumbling walls, their laughter echoing against the hollow stones, while elders pause to remember or reflect, their eyes tracing the jagged outlines of buildings that once housed generations. To outsiders, the ruins may appear desolate, lifeless, or even eerie. But to those who live with them, they are part of the rhythm of life, a constant reminder of endurance, memory, and the fragility of existence. Walking through the streets of the new town, it is easy to see how intertwined daily life is with the past. Farmers tend their fields not far from walls pockmarked by bullet holes. Shopkeepers close their stores as the sun dips behind broken towers, their movements reflecting routines shaped by centuries of life and disruption. Some families live on the edge of the old town, maintaining a delicate balance between modern comfort and historical presence. The ruins are not just a backdrop. They influence the community's sense of identity, history, and continuity. Residents often speak of the ruins with a mixture of pride, sorrow, and caution. They describe them as teachers, as guardians, and sometimes as unwelcome reminders. Some remember playing among the stones as children, imagining stories of knights, battles, and survival. Others recount tales passed down from their parents and grandparents, stories that cannot be found in books, stories of families who vanished overnight, of neighbors who became strangers, of a town that once breathed and laughed and cried, now captured in fragments of stone. These stories are living memory, carried in conversation, in gestures, in the careful preservation of what remains. Cultural life has also embraced the ruins, transforming them into spaces of reflection and expression. Artists come from across Spain and beyond to photograph, paint, and interpret the skeletal structures. Writers and poets use the town as a symbol, capturing not only its destruction, but the quiet resilience it embodies. Festivals and commemorative events occasionally take place among the ruins, bringing together communities and visitors in a dialogue between past and present. Music drifts through the air on special occasions, a haunting reminder that life continues even in the shadows of loss. These acts of cultural remembrance demonstrate that Belchite is not merely a site of devastation. It is a canvas for memory, a space for human creativity and reflection. Yet living near ruins is not without complexity. Residents speak of the tension between honoring the past and moving forward. Children grow up with questions they cannot fully answer. Elders carry memories too heavy to share completely. The ruins serve as a mirror, reflecting not only the town's history, but also the emotional and psychological landscape of those who call this region home. Trauma, pride, curiosity, and resilience coexist in the daily rhythms of life, showing that history is never truly behind us. It shapes our present, quietly and persistently. Visitors often feel this tension as well. Walking through the ruins, it is impossible not to feel the weight of the past pressing lightly on the shoulders, urging respect, reflection, and empathy. Photography and tourism bring attention, but they also introduce the challenge of interpretation. How to experience history without commodifying it. How to honor memory without intruding on lived reality. Local guides often speak of this delicately, balancing storytelling with respect, revealing the human side of the ruins while acknowledging the limitations of comprehension. The physical environment also tells stories of resilience. Wildflowers push through the cracks in stone, birds nest in empty windows, and the wind carries the faint scent of earth and time. Nature reclaims, adapts, and heals in ways that humans sometimes cannot. In this interplay between destruction and growth, between ruin and life, Belchite becomes more than a town, it becomes a living lesson. It teaches patience, humility, and the power of memory to endure when material structures crumble. It reminds us that life continues, even in places scarred by history, and that human resilience finds a way even in the shadow of loss. Even as modernity encroaches, as roads, electricity, and modern housing expand, the ruins maintain a quiet authority. They demand to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be understood. Residents move through the dual realities of old and new, learning to coexist with the past while navigating the demands of contemporary life. And in this coexistence, Belchite finds its rhythm, a rhythm defined by history, memory, and resilience. Visitors leave changed, residents live on quietly aware, and the ruins stand unyielding as a testament to the enduring complexity of human experience. The silence begins long before you reach the ruins. It begins in homes where conversations are measured, where memories of war are tucked away behind polite smiles and careful words. In Belchite, this silence is almost sacred. Parents and grandparents, shaped by experiences too painful to recount, learned to protect the next generation, not with stories, but with omission. They learned that some truths, once spoken aloud, could weigh too heavily, burdening those who had not yet seen the worst of humanity. And so, silence became a language of its own, a language of memory and caution, of grief that could not be fully expressed, of trauma passed down in quiet gestures rather than in words. Walking through the town today, one begins to sense this generational echo. Children hear fragments, pieces of stories stitched together from whispers and half-remembered tales. They notice the way elders linger on certain ruins longer than others, the way hands tremble when pointing toward a scarred wall, the way eyes avert themselves when a particularly dark memory surfaces. They learn to read these signs, piecing together history in a way that is both intimate and incomplete. The silence is not emptiness, it is presence, heavy and constant, shaping understanding and identity in subtle, inescapable ways. The psychological impact of this silence is profound. Trauma does not vanish with time. It morphs, adapts, and finds new forms. In Belchite, it manifests in the stories families tell or do not tell. It manifests in the cautious way history is approached, the reluctance to dwell on certain events, the instinct to protect the young from truths that may be too cruel to bear. Psychologists studying war-torn regions often speak of intergenerational trauma, a phenomenon where the echoes of violence resonate through generations, altering behavior, perception, and relationships. In Belchite, these echoes are visible in both subtle and unmistakable ways. In hushed conversations, in sudden tears, in the quiet reverence given to ruins that no longer house living souls, but contain the weight of countless memories. Yet within this silence there is also resilience. Families develop their own rituals of remembrance, small acts that honor the past without fully articulating its horrors. They visit the ruins quietly, leaving flowers or stones, lighting candles, telling stories only to themselves. They preserve letters, photographs, and artifacts, objects that speak more clearly than words ever could. Children absorb these practices, learning to navigate the tension between acknowledgement and protection. In this way, the silence itself becomes a kind of inheritance, a complex gift of memory, grief, and survival, shaping identity in ways both subtle and profound. Elders often describe their own experiences with war in fragments. A story of a neighbor lost to the fighting, a glimpse of a destroyed home, the sound of artillery echoing through the streets, all recalled with careful selection, leaving out the unbearable parts. These fragments carry a dual purpose. They warn, they instruct, they preserve. They teach younger generations the cost of conflict without exposing them fully to its horrors. And yet, even in these fragments, the depth of loss and the magnitude of human suffering is unmistakable. The ruins, ever present, reinforce these lessons, making history tangible and unavoidable. The silence also creates space for reflection. It allows families to grapple with moral complexities, with questions of loyalty, betrayal, courage, and survival that cannot be easily answered. Why did some neighbors fight while others fled? Why were some spared while others vanished? These questions linger, unresolved, shaping conversations, behavior, and the moral compass of a community. The silence of Belchite is not emptiness. It is a living dialogue between generations, a negotiation between what is remembered and what must be protected, a space where history, memory, and human emotion coexist in fragile balance. Visitors who spend time here often sense this tension immediately. They notice the pause in speech, the careful choice of words, the way elders' gazes linger on certain walls as if seeking understanding from stones that have long ceased to respond. They feel the weight of absence, the echo of stories untold, the shadow of trauma that lingers long after the conflict has ended. And in this recognition, they understand that Belchite is more than ruins and reconstruction. It is a community shaped by silence, a town where memory and loss are woven into the very fabric of life, and where the echoes of one generation resonate deeply into the next. Belchite teaches an uncomfortable, vital lesson, that history is not simply events written in books, but lived experience carried in the hearts and minds of people who survive it. Trauma is not erased with time. It transforms, persists, and informs the way communities, families, and individuals relate to the world. In this town, silence is not absence, it is presence, a quiet testament to the resilience of memory, the weight of history, and the enduring power of human endurance. And as night falls over the ruins and the new streets alike, one cannot help but feel that this silence, heavy and persistent, is itself a promise, one that the town will never allow to be broken. Even as time moves forward, the people of Belchite have refused to let the town's history fade. The ruins are not simply remnants of war. They are lessons, warnings, and stories that demand to be remembered. Across Spain, and even internationally, efforts have emerged to preserve the town's memory, to honor those who lived, suffered, and perished, and to ensure that the lessons of the past are not lost to neglect or convenience. These efforts take many forms: preservation of the ruins themselves, educational programs, cultural initiatives, and public ceremonies that bring history to life for new generations. Walking through Belchite today, one can see the results of these initiatives. The town's skeletal remains are carefully stabilized, with walls reinforced to prevent collapse, and pathways established to guide visitors safely through the ruins. Local historians work tirelessly to document stories, collecting oral histories from elders who remember the town before, during, and after the war. Photographs, letters, and artifacts are preserved and catalogued, forming a tangible connection to the lives that once animated the streets. Each effort is a conscious act of memory, a refusal to allow the town's history to fade quietly into obscurity. Educational programs have become a central component of these preservation efforts. Schools organize regular trips to Belchite, allowing students to experience history firsthand rather than merely reading about it in textbooks. Teachers encourage young people to reflect on the human cost of war, the complexity of memory, and the moral challenges faced by those who lived through conflict. These trips are more than educational exercises. They are rites of passage that connect generations, bridging the gap between the past and the present. Children learn not only about destruction and loss, but also about resilience, survival, and the enduring strength of community. Cultural initiatives have further strengthened Belchite's relevance. Artists, filmmakers, and writers come from across Spain and the world, inspired by the haunting beauty of the ruins. Photography exhibitions capture the interplay of light and shadow among collapsed walls. Music and theater performances are staged among the stones, creating a dialogue between contemporary creativity and historical memory. Writers and poets find in Belchite a symbol for reflection, resilience, and the complexities of human experience. In these artistic endeavors, the town becomes more than a site of devastation. It becomes a living, breathing participant in the creation of meaning and memory. Local communities also hold commemorative events, marking anniversaries of the war and celebrating the town's endurance. Residents gather among the ruins, laying flowers, lighting candles, and sharing stories. These rituals serve multiple purposes: honoring those lost, reinforcing communal bonds, and educating visitors. They are acts of remembrance that transform memory from something abstract into something tangible and participatory. In these moments, Belchite's ruins are not silent. They speak through human presence, through gestures of respect, reflection, and continuity. Tourism plays a complex role in memory preservation as well. Visitors from around the world come to Belchite, drawn by curiosity, history, and the desire to witness the past firsthand. Tourism has brought economic opportunities to the region, enabling further preservation efforts and creating a bridge between local memory and global awareness. Yet locals remain careful to maintain authenticity, balancing access with respect for the town's history. Guides emphasize the human stories behind the stones, ensuring that visitors understand that these ruins are not simply relics. They are witnesses, teachers, and reminders of the consequences of conflict. Perhaps most importantly, these preservation efforts have kept Franco's promise in a broader, more profound sense. While the new town fulfilled the material aspect of reconstruction, these initiatives ensure that the past is not forgotten, that the memory of those who suffered is honored, and that Belchite remains a place of reflection for generations to come. The town teaches that memory is not passive. It requires attention, care, and deliberate acts of remembrance. By maintaining the ruins, documenting stories, and engaging the community, Belchite becomes a testament to the enduring power of memory over oblivion. As the sun sets and casts long shadows over the ruins, the efforts to reclaim memory are visible in every stone, every plaque, every careful restoration. Belchite is more than a town frozen between destruction and reconstruction. It is a living dialogue between past and present, between memory and forgetting. Visitors leave with the weight of history, but also with hope that a community, a nation, and even the world can learn from its past, honor those who came before, and build a future conscious of both resilience and responsibility. In this way, Belchite remains relevant not only as a site of tragedy, but as a beacon of human determination to remember, reflect, and endure. Franco's promise was simple in words, but complex in consequence. Rebuild Belchite, restore life, and offer a future that could rise above the ruins of war. On paper, the new town was completed. Streets were laid, houses constructed, and public buildings erected. Life returned in a structured, orderly fashion. Yet, as you walk through the old town and gaze upon the skeletal remains, a question lingers. Was the promise truly fulfilled? Or did it leave a wound only partially healed? Historians and locals alike wrestle with this question. Some argue that the reconstruction succeeded in its practical sense. Families had homes, commerce resumed, and daily life continued. Franco's government had delivered what it could: functional infrastructure and a vision of progress. The town once shattered was now accessible, livable, and safe. By this measure, the promise was met. But as with many promises of this kind, the reality is more complicated than simple bricks and streets. The emotional, cultural, and historical dimensions of Belchite could not be rebuilt, and these are the dimensions that continue to define the town today. Public opinion reveals this complexity vividly. Older residents often describe a mixture of gratitude and loss. They appreciate the safety and order provided by the new town, yet they remember the lives, homes, and memories left behind in the ruins. Children and grandchildren, raised in the shadow of both old and new Belchite, inherit an ambiguous legacy. They live in the restored town, go to school there, and participate in its modern life. Yet, when they step into the ruins, they are reminded of what was lost, of a history that cannot be fully reclaimed. In this sense, Franco's promise exists as both fulfilled and unfulfilled, tangible in some ways, intangible in others. Scholars analyzing Belchite often emphasize the symbolic power of the ruins. While the new town addressed immediate needs, the old town became a permanent reminder that human suffering, memory, and history cannot be erased. The ruins force reflection, not only about the Spanish Civil War, but about the nature of reconstruction, reconciliation, and historical responsibility. They challenge any notion that rebuilding structures alone is sufficient to heal the scars of conflict. Memory, community, and identity are far more complex, and the people of Belchite live at the intersection of all these forces. The debate extends into wider historical discourse as well. Some historians view the new Belchite as an attempt to assert control over memory, to construct a sanitized narrative that emphasizes progress while softening the trauma of the past. Others argue that Franco's Promesse, flawed though it may have been, represents a genuine attempt at recovery in the aftermath of devastation. Both perspectives are valid, and both coexist in the town today. Visitors walking the streets encounter not just physical reconstruction, but the ongoing tension between imposed narratives and lived experiences, between political intent and personal memory. Even within the town itself, the fulfillment of the promise is measured differently by different generations. Elders recall the devastation and honor survival. Middle-aged residents navigate the practical benefits of modern life alongside the weight of inherited memory. Younger residents, growing up in a reconstructed town, engage with the ruins as historical artifacts, as symbols of resilience, and sometimes as spaces of curiosity or play. Each perspective adds layers to the question of fulfillment, highlighting that the promise was never just about buildings. It was about human experience, memory, and the ongoing negotiation between past and present. Walking through both old and new Belchite today, the duality of Franco's Promesse is undeniable. The new town thrives in a practical sense, yet the ruins remain as potent reminders of what reconstruction could not replace. The promise was fulfilled in some ways, yet incomplete in others. The lives, stories, and memories of the past continue to resonate, reminding residents and visitors alike that history cannot be neatly packaged or fully reconstructed. Belchite teaches that promises, especially those tied to trauma and loss, are complex. They can offer restoration, but cannot erase grief, memory, or history. As the sun sets, casting long shadows across both the orderly streets of the new town and the jagged remains of the old, one begins to understand the full weight of the promise. It was a promise of life, yes, but also a promise of forgetting. A promise that history might be contained within walls and bricks. And yet, history persists. Memory persists. Belchite stands as evidence that the fulfillment of a promise is never simple, never total, and often carries layers of contradiction that must be acknowledged, respected, and understood. In this coexistence of fulfillment and incompletion, Belchite finds its truth complex, haunting, and profoundly human. As the camera lingers on the ruins, the wind moving gently through broken archways, it becomes clear that Belchite is more than stone and mortar. It is memory made tangible. It is history carved into every wall, every shattered window, every street that once carried life. The town does not exist solely in the past, nor only in the present. It exists in the interplay between both. Walking these streets, one senses the heartbeat of generations, the pulse of lives interrupted, and the quiet endurance of memory refusing to be silenced. Belchite's lessons are not limited to Spain, nor to the specific events of the Civil War. They are universal lessons about the cost of conflict, the fragility of human life, and the resilience of those who survive. The ruins speak of choices made in moments of fear, courage, desperation, and hope. They remind us that history is never simply recorded. It is lived, remembered, passed down, and interpreted. In these stones there is wisdom, warning, and an invitation to observe, to reflect, and to remember. Standing at the edge of the old town, one can see the new streets stretching away, orderly, modern, functional. Life continues there, and yet it is inseparable from what lies behind. The promise of Franco may have reconstructed homes and streets, but it could never rebuild memories, laughter, loss, or love frozen in the ruins. Those intangible elements live on, shaping community, identity, and consciousness. Belchite is therefore a town of dualities, destruction and reconstruction, silence and story, absence and presence. It is a place where memory refuses to be contained, where the past is alive, breathing alongside the present. Visitors leave the ruins with a sense of humility and introspection. They carry away not only images of destruction, but also the awareness of human endurance. They sense the fragility of peace, the importance of remembrance, and the enduring complexity of life after trauma. Locals continue their lives among the juxtaposition of past and present, honoring ancestors, teaching history, and balancing memory with practicality. The town teaches that resilience is not always about rebuilding in the physical sense. It is about carrying forward stories, lessons, and human connections that no destruction can erase. Belchite reminds us that memory is a living force. It shapes generations, informs values, and transforms landscapes. Its ruins are not merely historical markers. They are active participants in life, demanding reflection, understanding, and respect. Through preservation, storytelling, and cultural engagement, Belchite continues to educate and inspire. The town is simultaneously a cautionary tale and a testament to endurance. A place where the past refuses to die, and where the human spirit proves capable of both witnessing and surviving. As night falls, the ruins take on a haunting beauty. Shadows stretch across walls, moonlight glances off fractured stone, and the wind whispers stories that cannot be entirely heard but can be profoundly felt. In this quiet, the true significance of Belchite emerges. It is a monument not just to what was destroyed, but to what survives in memory. It teaches that promises, whether fulfilled or incomplete, exist not in declarations alone, but in the ways we honor, reflect upon, and learn from the past. Belchite is, above all, a living history, a town where silence speaks, ruins remember, and life persists. It is a place that asks difficult questions, offers profound lessons, and challenges all who enter to see beyond the surface, to confront loss, and to recognize the enduring power of human memory. Here, the past is never gone. It waits, quietly, persistently, inviting us to witness, to reflect, and to carry forward the stories it holds. And in doing so, Belchite becomes more than a town. It becomes a teacher, a mirror, and a promise, one that refuses to fade. No matter how many years pass, no matter how much time moves forward. Walking through the ruins of Belchite, one can almost hear the echoes of the people who once called this town home. Their voices, though long silenced, persist in memory, passed down through generations in fragments of stories, in whispered recollections, in the way hands linger on fractured walls. These are not just stories of destruction. They are stories of survival, courage, and the quiet determination to endure when everything familiar has been torn apart. One resident, now in her 80s, recalls the day the fighting came to her street. She was a child then, no more than 10 years old, clutching her younger brother's hand as their family fled from exploding shells. The memory is vivid, etched into every line of her face. The roar of artillery, the smoke that made it impossible to see, the cries of neighbors disappearing into the chaos. Yet even amid fear, she remembers moments of humanity, a neighbor sharing water, a soldier sparing a family hiding in a cellar. Small acts that sustained life when all else was collapsing. These fragments of memory reveal the resilience that quietly persisted in the shadow of devastation. Another survivor speaks of returning to the ruins years later, hoping to recover pieces of a life lost. Her home had been leveled, her possessions gone, and her family dispersed. Yet she remembers finding a charred book, a small toy, a photograph half buried in rubble remnants of ordinary life that seemed miraculous in their survival. These artifacts became anchors to the past, tangible evidence that, even in destruction, memory could endure. They remind us that survival is not only physical, it is emotional, cultural, and deeply personal. Stories of bravery and sacrifice abound. A young man, barely 16, recalls hiding neighbors in his family's cellar, risking his life to protect those who had nowhere else to go. Others recount walking through streets riddled with bullets, seeking water, food, or safety. Each narrative carries a duality: terror and courage, despair and hope, vulnerability and resilience. These experiences shape the town's identity, embedding lessons about human endurance into every corner of Belchite. Generational transmission of these memories is central to understanding Belchite's human story. Children and grandchildren grew up hearing fragments of what occurred, absorbing the weight of survival without fully experiencing the chaos themselves. The silence surrounding certain details was deliberate. Parents and grandparents sought to protect them, but the lessons persisted. Young people learned the value of community, the fragility of peace, and the strength required to endure loss. They understood that survival is more than living. It is carrying memory forward and learning from it. Even decades later, survivors revisit the ruins, sometimes alone, sometimes with family. Their visits are acts of remembrance and reflection, connecting past to present. They trace the lines of destroyed homes, point out landmarks that no longer exist, and share stories that transform the ruins from empty stone into a living chronicle. Children accompanying them listen intently, learning that history is not an abstract series of events, but a lived experience, rich with emotion, complexity, and lessons for the future. These personal narratives also challenge the notion that Franco's Promesse fully restored Belchite. While the new town provided structure, safety, and order, it could not replace the homes, the memories, or the intimate histories embedded in the old streets. Survivors carry a dual consciousness, one foot in the present, one tethered to the past. Their stories remind us that the human dimension of reconstruction cannot be measured in bricks or streets alone. Memory, emotion, and lived experience are equally essential to understanding what was lost and what endures. Even for those born long after the war, the survivors' stories shape identity and understanding. They inspire curiosity, empathy, and reflection. Visitors often remark on the depth of human experience these narratives reveal. The courage to survive, the small acts of kindness amid chaos, the resilience required to rebuild life in the shadow of loss. Belchite, through its survivors, becomes more than a historical site. It becomes a living testimony to the power of human endurance and the necessity of memory. In the quiet moments, standing among the ruins, one can feel the weight of these stories. They linger in the air like whispers, reminding us that history is not solely about events or dates. It is about people, their choices, and their resilience. Belchite's human story is not confined to textbooks. It lives in the voices, memories, and reflections of those who endured the unthinkable and carried their lessons forward. And it is through these personal stories that the town achieves a profound form of immortality, ensuring that the legacy of life, courage, and survival continues to resonate across generations. Belchite is no longer only a local story. It has become a symbol recognized far beyond Spain. Its ruins have drawn the attention of historians, filmmakers, artists, and tourists from around the world, each seeking to understand the human and historical significance of a town caught between destruction and resilience. International recognition has transformed Belchite from a forgotten casualty of war into a powerful testament to memory, endurance, and the consequences of human conflict. Film and documentary crews have long been fascinated by the town. The skeletal streets, the hollowed-out buildings, and the stark contrast between old and new provide a visual narrative that is hauntingly cinematic. Scenes shot in Belchite appear in documentaries on the Spanish Civil War, in artistic films exploring human loss, and even in international cinematic projects that aim to evoke the devastation of war and the resilience of survivors. Each frame captures not only the physical ruins, but the emotional weight embedded in them, the story of lives interrupted, communities fractured, and the slow process of recovery. Photography has also played a critical role in cementing Belchite's international reputation. Photographers from across Europe, Asia, and the Americas visit to document the ruins, capturing the interplay of light and shadow on fractured walls, the textures of crumbling stone, and the haunting beauty of a town suspended in time. These images circulate worldwide, appearing in exhibitions, books, and online platforms, sparking curiosity and reflection. Through the lens of the camera, Belchite becomes a universal story, a story of human fragility, endurance, and memory that transcends borders. Literature has similarly embraced Belchite. Writers and poets find inspiration in its ruins, using the town as a metaphor for loss, resilience, and the enduring weight of history. Novels and essays recount imagined or real experiences within Belchite, exploring the moral complexities of war and reconstruction. In these works, the town serves not just as a setting, but as a character itself, silent, unyielding, and persistent, demanding attention and reflection from all who encounter it. Belchite's cultural significance extends beyond art and literature. Scholars and historians reference the town as a case study in the long-term impacts of war, the challenges of reconstruction, and the persistence of memory across generations. International conferences and research projects examine Belchite as both a historical site and a living lesson in resilience, trauma, and the ethical responsibilities of remembering. The town's story resonates universally. Destruction may erase structures, but it cannot erase memory, human connection, or the lessons that emerge from shared tragedy. Tourism has also contributed to Belchite's global relevance. Visitors come not only to witness the ruins, but to engage with history in a deeply personal way. Walking among the broken walls, touching the remnants of homes, and hearing stories from local guides creates an experience that is both visceral and reflective. International travelers often leave transformed, carrying a renewed awareness of the costs of war, the resilience of human communities, and the importance of preserving memory. Belchite becomes not just a destination, but a moral encounter, a place that challenges assumptions, evokes empathy, and inspires reflection. Yet with international recognition comes responsibility. Locals carefully navigate the balance between accessibility and preservation. Tourism brings economic benefits, but it also introduces the risk of trivializing the town's history. Guides, educators, and community leaders work diligently to ensure that visitors understand the depth of human experience embedded in the ruins, that they do not treat Belchite as a set piece, but as a living memory. In this way, the town's global impact is paired with local stewardship, preserving authenticity while sharing lessons with the world. Belchite's cultural and international resonance underscores a larger truth. Some histories cannot be confined to a single place or audience. They ripple outward, touching distant lands, shaping art, thought, and understanding far from their origin. Belchite teaches that even in destruction, human stories endure. Its recognition across borders affirms the universal relevance of survival, memory, and the power of witnessing history firsthand. It reminds us that ruins are not silent. They speak, provoke, and teach, connecting people across time, space, and culture. Standing among the ruins today, it is clear why Belchite continues to captivate global attention. It embodies the intersection of human tragedy and resilience, the coexistence of memory and reconstruction, and the complex legacy of promises, both fulfilled and incomplete. As a cultural icon and historical witness, Belchite transcends geography, becoming a universal lesson in endurance, memory, and the responsibility to remember. Its story is far from static. It continues to evolve, touching hearts and minds worldwide, ensuring that the town's legacy endures not only in Spain, but across the world. Belchite has long inspired creativity. Its ruins, jagged and haunting, serve as both canvas and storyteller, drawing artists, writers, and filmmakers eager to capture its essence. Painters are drawn to the contrast of light and shadow, framing broken walls against a sky that seems impossibly vast, while photographers seek the stories embedded in every crack and fragment. Each stone carries the weight of history, yet through artistic interpretation, the town transforms, telling stories not only of destruction, but also of resilience, memory, and human endurance. Filmmakers often choose Belchite for its authentic, cinematic quality. The town's decayed streets and hollowed structures provide a natural set, eliminating the need for artificial reconstruction. Yet, it is not merely a backdrop, it is a character. Directors and documentarians describe the ruins as alive, responding to the narrative they seek to tell, echoing the emotions of the people whose lives were forever altered by war. Scenes shot here do more than depict history. They invite reflection, empathy, and a connection with a past that is palpable and immediate. Writers and poets, too, find in Belchite a source of inspiration. Some create fictionalized accounts of survival within the ruins, while others recount actual events through the lens of memory and imagination. In every case, the town acts as a mirror, reflecting both human fragility and strength. The ruins provoke questions. How do we bear loss? How do communities endure trauma? How does memory shape identity across generations? Through literature, Belchite's lessons travel beyond geography, entering hearts and minds far from its borders. Preservation efforts have grown alongside this cultural fascination. Local authorities, historians, and volunteers work to stabilize crumbling walls, catalog artifacts, and protect the site from further decay. The challenges are immense. Weather erodes stone, vegetation pushes through foundations, and decades of neglect have left structures precarious. Yet each act of preservation is a declaration. The past matters. The memory of those who lived and suffered here must endure. And Belchite will not be left to vanish quietly. These efforts are as much about honoring humanity as they are about maintaining architecture. Community engagement is central to these projects. Residents participate in guided tours, oral history collection, and local restoration work, ensuring that preservation is not solely an external effort, but a living, communal responsibility. Schools incorporate visits into curricula, allowing children to witness history firsthand, and festivals occasionally bring contemporary life into the ruins, connecting memory with daily existence. These acts reaffirm that Belchite is not just a relic, it is a living testament, maintained and respected by those who understand its value intimately. Yet the intersection of art, tourism, and preservation is complex. International interest can bring economic opportunity, but it also risks commodifying memory. Local authorities carefully manage access, creating a balance between education, respect, and sustainability. Guides emphasize human stories rather than spectacle, ensuring that visitors leave with understanding rather than mere impressions of beauty or desolation. In this delicate balance, Belchite continues to teach that memory is active. It must be engaged with, honored, and preserved thoughtfully. Artistic interpretation also helps process trauma. By capturing the ruins' haunting beauty, creators transform loss into reflection, allowing both locals and audiences worldwide to confront history indirectly yet meaningfully. Photographs, films, and paintings communicate emotions that words sometimes cannot, giving voice to those silenced by time or conflict. Through these works, Belchite's story transcends its physical location, reaching hearts and minds globally, while also preserving a record for future generations. Ultimately, the convergence of art and preservation reinforces Belchite's identity as both a historical site and a living cultural resource. It demonstrates that memory is not only maintained through bricks and mortar, but also through interpretation, creativity, and human engagement. The town is neither static nor forgotten. It is constantly being seen, understood, and remembered in new ways. The ruins remain a silent teacher, yet through artistic and preservation efforts, they speak loudly to anyone willing to listen, reminding us of resilience, responsibility, and the enduring power of human memory. As the day fades over Belchite, the ruins cast long, silent shadows across streets that once teemed with life. The new town continues its rhythm. Children playing, neighbors chatting, commerce flowing. But the old town remains a solemn reminder that history is never fully behind us. Belchite exists in two worlds at once, one of continuity, one of memory. And it is in this duality that the town reveals its deepest lesson, that memory, survival, and human resilience are inseparable from the very places we inhabit. Walking through the ruins, one cannot help but feel the presence of lives once lived. Laughter that echoes faintly through hollow walls, footsteps frozen mid-stride, whispered fears that linger between fractured stones. Every scar on the buildings tells a story. Every collapsed roof speaks of a family interrupted. Every cracked wall a testament to human endurance. These remnants of the past are not mere history, they are lessons, warnings, and inspiration, speaking to all who take the time to listen. Belchite teaches that survival is more than rebuilding structures. It is about carrying forward stories, bearing witness to human suffering, and nurturing the resilience that allows communities to endure. Franco's Promesse rebuilt streets and houses, but it could not restore memory, laughter, or love. Those elements survived in the hearts of the people, in stories passed between generations, and in the silent presence of the ruins. The town demonstrates that reconstruction is as much about humanity as it is about architecture. The international attention Belchite has received underscores its universal significance. Visitors, artists, filmmakers, and scholars all engage with the town, interpreting its lessons through their own perspectives. Yet despite global recognition, Belchite remains profoundly local. It belongs to those who remember, those who preserve, and those who carry its legacy forward. The balance between accessibility and authenticity ensures that while the town educates and inspires, it never loses sight of the people for whom it has always mattered most. Artistic interpretations have amplified Belchite's voice, giving life to stories that cannot be fully captured in history books alone. Films, photographs, literature, and performances translate trauma and resilience into experiences that reach far beyond the town's borders. Through creativity, the ruins speak to humanity at large, reminding us of our shared capacity for endurance, memory, and reflection. Art becomes a bridge, connecting past and present, local and global, suffering and understanding. As night fully descends, the ruins take on a spectral beauty. Moonlight glints off broken stones, shadows shift across walls, and the wind whispers through empty windows. In this quiet, one senses the persistence of history, the resilience of memory, and the indelible mark of human experience. Belchite stands as a testament to the past, a challenge to the present, and a lesson for the future. It asks us to reflect, to remember, and to act responsibly with the knowledge of what came before. In the end, Belchite is more than a town. It is a living memory, a teacher of endurance, and a symbol of humanity's capacity to survive, rebuild, and remember. The ruins are silent, yet they speak with clarity and power to those willing to listen. They remind us that history is never fully past, that trauma can coexist with resilience, and that memory must be nurtured, preserved, and honored. Belchite's story is one of contradiction and continuity, loss and survival, silence and voice. And as the final light fades, one understands that this town, with all its scars and stories, will endure not only in stone, not only in history books, but in the hearts, minds, and imaginations of all who bear witness. Belchite teaches us that memory is eternal, that human resilience is profound, and that the promise of remembering is perhaps the most vital promise of all. In every shadowed wall, every silent street, and every story passed down, Belchite lives teaching, warning, inspiring, and refusing ever to be forgotten. So as you leave Belchite behind, remember this: ruins are not just reminders of what was lost, they are witnesses to what endures. In every shattered wall, in every silent street lies a story of resilience, of memory, and of the human spirit refusing to vanish. History may have scarred this town, but it has also given it a voice that speaks to all of us, urging us to remember, to reflect, and to carry forward the lessons of the past. Belchite is more than a place. It is a promise that memory survives, that courage endures, that humanity prevails. If you want to explore more stories like this, of hidden histories, forgotten places, and the power of memory, make sure to watch our other videos. Listen, learn, and never forget.